North Korea is ramping up the pressure on the U.S. following the Moon-Trump summit, which failed to bring good news to the regime. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has placed his focus back on the state's military activities while slamming U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo for his misinterpretation of Pyongyang's intentions on denuclearization process. And all of this as Kim Jong-un prepares for his first summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Today, we go in depth on the latest regional developments surrounding the Korean Peninsula with Dr. Myong-hyun of Asan Institute for Policy Studies. It's good to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start off with North Korea's latest display of its new weapon. Kim Jong-un, in an apparent move to, I guess, send some kind of message, attended the test firing of what the North called a new type tactical guided weapon. Now, opinions still vary on exactly what weapon this is. How do you analyze it?
Well, it looks like North Korea tested not a ballistic missile, but some type of cruise missile with a guidance system. So in that sense, it doesn't really reach the threshold of provocation that the United States and its allies could consider to be a red line. So this is clearly, the timing was made in order to send a message to the United States, and we see this from all fronts. North Korea has been ramping up its statements regarding the United States and its lack of willingness to negotiate the way North Korea wants. So they have said that in sort of political statements. Now they are showing this reaction. So this is their political campaign, so to speak, or send a strong message to Washington.
So you think this North Korea's purpose was to send a message to the
Exactly.
U.S.? Now, North Korea once again caught us off guard by announcing on Thursday that it wants another figure from Washington other than Pompeo for nuclear negotiations. And this came while North Korea and the U.S. both have hinted that they're open for a third North Korea-U.S. summit. How do you read into this?
Well, clearly, even though on the surface, both sides are willing to hold another summit, but on the underneath surface, the gap in position between the two sides couldn't be wider than ever. I mean, the position of the United States is that after it's been showing after the Hanoi summit that United States wants North Korea to completely denuclearize before United States rewards North Korea for its good behavior, whereas North Korea doesn't want to do any of that. They want step by step that denuclearization that starts from little to expand to a much bigger denuclearization steps later on. So in that sense, there's a wide gap between the two positions, and therefore, I mean, the Seoul summit is unlikely to be realized. So I think North Korea is attacking Secretary Pompeo personally to ramp up this. Somehow to signal how emotionally angry they are in a way to Washington, but we have to understand that they are not really upset with Pompeo himself. We're talking about Pompeo's position, the particular position regarding denuclearization. So it's more about substance rather than personal style or anything like that. So if Secretary Pompeo changes position towards denuclearization, then everything will be fine again.
In response to North Korea's request for a change of Washington's top nuclear negotiator, the U.S. has just simply stated that it remains ready to engage Pyongyang in constructive talks. How do you interpret Washington's response?
Well, the United States has by now accumulated enough experience dealing with Pyongyang, and particularly with outbursts against the personalities in Washington and the part of the diplomatic corps. So I think the United States understands that this is more about substance of the discussion. Right now, there's a big gap between the two countries. So if that gap is resolved, then again, North Korea will be happy to come back to the negotiation table, even if Pompeo is at the face of the diplomatic position on the part of Washington.
Now, Russia has confirmed that a North Korea-Russia summit will take place at the end of this month. It will be the first summit between the two countries in 8 years, and it'll also mark the first time for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to sit face-to-face with President Putin. What are some of the expected agenda?
Well, we have to look at the location of the summit. I mean, we're not talking about the summit taking place in Moscow. The summit is taking place on the sidelines of actually, Vladimir Putin is meeting Kim Jong-un on his way to Beijing. So this is, I mean, essentially both Russia and North Korea is attaching less importance to the substance of the meeting itself or whatever agenda they might have about the summit. It's more about the optics of a Russian leader and North Korean leader meeting for the first time in the aftermath of the collapse of talks in Hanoi. So this is more about North Korea and Russia showing that they're on the same page when it comes to the North Korea's approach towards denuclearization. So the agenda that's going to be talked about will be all like, symbolic stuff that we already know about. Essentially, like Russia is behind North Korea when it comes to North Korea's the commitment to denuclearization. Also, they're going to talk about a little bit about the potential economic cooperation between the two countries. But then we know that under the current sanctions regime, it will be difficult for Russia to bypass those measures. So it'll be all like, essentially at a planning stage rather than anything that could be implemented in the short term.
Now, Russia is a veto-wielding member at the UN Security Council, and it had previously supported North Korea's step-by-step denuclearization approach. And it also said that North Korea's sanctions must be lifted according to North Korea's denuclearization steps. And some experts predict that Kim Jong-un may be able to reconfirm that stance, that Russia's support this time. Do you agree?
Well, that'll be totally fine with North Korea. That's exactly what North Korea wants, a step-by-step denuclearization process, which even the United States sounded like it was committed to before the Hanoi summit. So, that's the reason why this summit between North Korea and Russia will serve as a reminder to Washington that this was the diplomatic approach that was working before Hanoi, and therefore the ball is in the American court to respond.
So do you think Kim Jong-un will be able to earn Russia's support on that?
Yeah, definitely there'll be a confirmation of that.
Now, as the world closely watches the upcoming Kim-Putin summit, much attention is also drawn to how Kim Jong-un would get there.
Okay.
Although the summit venue is yet to be announced. Would he pass by China en route to Russia, do you think?
Well, there's actually a direct connection between North Korea and Russia through railways. Russia and North Korea share a very short border of 70 kilometers long. And it's actually, there's a nice railway connection between the two countries from the North Korean village of Myong-hyun to the Russian village of Asan. So that's the shortest route from Pyeongyang to Vladivostok, where the summit is supposed to take place. So going through China will be actually going around on purpose for no apparent reason. So I would expect Kim Jong-un to go straight to Vladivostok using this direct railway connection, but the North Koreans could surprise us again.
Right. We will never know. We will have to keep close tabs on that. Now, meanwhile, U.S. Special Representative on North Korea, Stephen Biegun, also made his trip to Russia, and he discussed with his Russian counterparts reportedly on efforts to achieve North Korea's denuclearization. What specific details do you think they exchanged, and would the talks have an impact on the upcoming Kim-Putin summit?
Well, I think one area of concern for the United States right now could be the possibility of Russia aiding some sort of sanctions evasion activities for North Korea. We know that some of the ships involved in the illegal ship-to-ship transfer of petroleum products aiding North Korea to evade the sanctions have Russian nationality. So there are Russian businessmen who are involved in this kind of illicit transfer of illicit economic activities concerning North Korea. So in that sense, I think Steve Biegun will be reminding his Russian counterparts about the illegality of these kind of activities and the fact that the American government is watching. And I think it's going to ask the Russian cooperation in stepping down on this kind of activities. So that could be a main point in the agenda. And second one will be to relay the message. Since Putin is meeting with Kim Jong-un in Vladivostok, asking the Russians to send a message, relay a message from Washington about the fact that Washington is still committed to solving these problems through dialogue.
And do you think Russia is more likely to stick to its international obligations despite North Korea's possible requests?
Well, definitely. Russia has been, there's a mixed record when it comes to Russia's commitment to observing the UN sanctions measures against North Korea. But overall, Russia has been actually doing a pretty good job of keeping up the measures. So I think Russia probably, understands that if Russian companies keep violating the sanctions, they face potential sanctions by the United States. So that should be a concern to the Russian government.
Now, President Moon Jae-in is now officially pushing for a fourth round of inter-Korean summit. And with that, the possibility of sending a special envoy to North Korea is emerging again. But the Blue House is keeping its lips sealed on the matter. Why?
Well, I think because the feedback from Pyongyang might have not been that positive so far. I mean, it looks like North Korea is more interested in reaffirming the bond that they have with the erstwhile allies during the Cold War, like China and Russia. So clearly, I think President Moon understands that timing might not be ripe for a fourth summit at the moment. And after all, President Moon came back from Washington pretty much empty-handed. Instead of being able to convince President Trump of the importance of restarting Kaesong and Gyeonggang-san. Instead, he was reminded by President Trump that the sanctions are still in place. So I think North Koreans are probably a little bit upset about that.
President Moon is now on his tour of 3 Central Asian nations, and during a speech delivered to the Uzbek parliament, which was delivered less than an hour ago, actually, he didn't mention that much about North Korea's denuclearization as expected. Do you think this was an intended move?
Well, it's not. I mean, the Central Asian countries are not on a good place to talk about denuclearization because that's exactly the place where we're talking about Kazakhstan in this case. It's a country that denuclearized completely without having any reward from the United States. So this Kazakhstan happened to be the exact realization of the Libyan model that National Security Advisor John Bolton talks about. So it wasn't a good place to talk about denuclearization of North Korea, I believe.
That's a very interesting point. Now, North Korea appears to be busy attempting to, as you've mentioned, solidify its friendship with Russia and China. And unfortunately for the Moon administration, the inter-Korean summit, as you've mentioned, doesn't seem to be on its top priority. How would closer North Korea ties with Russia and China affect South Korea's role as a mediator in North Korea's denuclearization process? Clearly,
what North Korea is doing diminishes South Korea's role as a mediator. I mean, clearly, Kim Jong-un is showing to the rest of the world that he's paying more attention to what Russians and the Chinese leaders have to say about North Korea's denuclearization and the state of negotiation in Washington. And Kim Jong-un has seen that President Moon wasn't able to convince President Trump to see those things from North Korean way. So maybe Kim Jong-un is going to cast a lot with Russian and Chinese leaders to see whether they can influence President Trump to change the attitude towards North Korea.
Now, you've mentioned that during the Kim-Putin summit, Russia will likely reconfirm its support for North Korea's step-by-step approach to denuclearization. If North Korea succeeds in winning Russia's support, how would that affect future North Korea-U.S. nuclear negotiations?
We're continually seeing hardening of position on both sides. Necessarily United States and North Korea are digging their heels in the respective position. So actually, we are seeing a tough time ahead for the Korean Peninsula in that regard. There should be some sort of a watershed moment between the two sides to change what's going on right now in the impasse negotiation between the two countries. So the summit with Russia is going to reconfirm the North Korean position, and I think that's not going to be good either for the South Korea or the United States.
So tough road ahead. What do you think is a smart strategy for South Korea to narrow the gap between North Korea and the U.S. as much as possible? We know it won't be easy, but what are some of the ways that South Korea could actually help in narrowing the gap between North Korea and the U.S.?
Well, I think President Moon will have to try harder to convince either North Korea or the United States to change their present position regarding denuclearization. That's the only way right now. And then, it'll take more than just, making commitment, verbal commitment to denuclearization or like a peaceful inter-Korean exchanges. I think President Moon will have to get out of his way and then at least take the risk, either with Washington or Pyongyang that, South Korea is committed to helping either side to completely denuclearize, but then they will have to, I'm talking about Pyongyang and Washington, to be more flexible to each other. And that's a very tough job to pull off for a country like South Korea right now.
Well, we'll have to first see how the Kim-Putin summit unfolds. Thank you so much, Dr. Go, for your insights today.
My pleasure.
And that wraps up this edition of News in Depth. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back with more timely and interesting topic to discuss with an expert next week. Have a great weekend.